This week's Torah reading is called Ki Tetzei Lemilchama. That's how it starts off. It says this very interesting law, which basically is not in effect now, for sure not. I don't really know exactly how it's going to be in effect when Moshiach comes also, but it was once in effect. Here we have the law. Listen, if it's in the Torah, it's eternal. If it's eternal, it means it's somehow or other, it'll be, in a physical way. But spiritually, for sure, it exists. Spiritually, for sure, it exists. And here's how. What's the law? What's the law? The law is that when you go out to war, Jewish soldiers, they go out to war, and usually when they went out to war, it says that the tablet, the broken tablets went out with them, and that anyone that had any sins at all would go back home. It says a year of a rachalevav, a person who was afraid, and explains in the Gemara. Rashi says also he's afraid because he has any sort of sins, and even the slightest transgression that he might have had. And he's afraid that because of that, God won't protect him, so he goes home because they don't want anyone who's going to be afraid in the war. So they go out to war, and a soldier sees a non-Jewish woman, and suddenly he has desire to have relations with her. So it says, okay, you can have relations. You can have one-time relations with her, but then he has to take her home, and then there's a whole process. She has to sit in his house for a month, and then he has to, he can't touch her in all that time. And then afterwards, if he wants to, he can marry her. If not, then he has to set her free. It's a bizarre law. What type of a law is this? It's a shameful thing to put this in the Torah. He goes out to war, and this is supposed to be the holiest of the holiest Jews, and he sees this Gentile lady, and all of a sudden he has desire for. He's fighting for the sake of the Lord. He's fighting for God. All of a sudden he sees ladies, he wants to have relations with them. What's going on over here? And the Torah says, "Oh, that's okay. It's okay. You can do it. Come on. Does that make any sense?" So we're going to see how much sense that it makes in spiritual tense. We'll see. So it says, when you go out to war on your enemies. In a short way, it says this shows on the decision of the godly soul to come out from above and to come into this body, to physical world. God's decision, I'm sorry. To take the godly soul and to put it into the physical world, which is the opposite of where you think it's supposed to be. Huh? Think it's supposed to be. It's like taking the holy ark from the Holy of Holies and putting it into, an amusement park or something worse. The holy soul comes down, and this is every single Jew, and it gets put into a body, into an animal soul, in order to refine it. That's the war. The godly soul comes in order to refine the world, to make the world into a perfect place, to make the world into clean the glasses so we can see godliness. The world becomes a little more transparent. It doesn't stop us from seeing the Creator. Until that a person, a Jew, first of all, has to refine himself, and then he can refine his part in the world, everything he comes in contact. This is in a way of a war on an enemy. War. There's dangers. You have to use. They say what is it? The methods of war, strategies of war. And especially now in the time of exile, that because of the tremendous concealment that we have, and so we really have to make a very strong war against evil. Now, when you can see it, when you remember that most of this evil that we're warring against is inside of us, and that as soon as we get rid of what's inside of us, then what's outside. But also we have to war. There's also evil in the world. And how do we get rid of this evil in the world? 99.9% is by just doing good. Just doing good. And the other 1% is to actively oppose bad. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, this what we just said. This is like a summary. This is a foretaste of what the Rebbe is going to tell us. So let's see what the Rebbe actually says. This is a speech, Parshas Ki Tetzei, Yud Aleph, Yud Dalet Elu. Like I said before, that the year that the Rebbe spoke, this is 1991. So the date, the calendar date, was 1 week more. There's 7 days, 7 days more than our, something like that. Okay, a Seder, the Kriyas Torah, the order in reading the Torah is Makom Shemafsikim b'Shabbos b'Shachris Sham Korim b'Mincha. The custom is that we read every Shabbat, we read a Torah portion. Every Shabbat, we read, a portion of the Torah, and where that Torah portion stops, because it's divided, the Torah is divided up into, 53 different portions. So where that stops, so we carry on next week. That ends that Torah portion. And then we carry on from that point next week. But before we get to next week, on the mincha of that Shabbat that we just finished, reading the Torah portion in the morning, so we read a little bit, like 1/7 of the next week's Torah portion. So it comes out that every Shabbat we read one whole Torah portion, and on the mincha prayer, which is a little bit later on the Shabbat, we read a little bit of next week's Torah portion. Okay, so what do we read this? This Shabbat? We're going to read Parshas Ki Tetzei, and where we stop reading in the morning, we continue and read a little bit from next week's Torah portion in the Mincha prayer. How so? The first Shabbat we read in the morning Breshit, and the Mincha we read Noach, 10 sentences or more. And similarly, we do the whole entire year. And when we read 2 Torah portions on one Shabbat, and I'm sorry, so the fact is that we read, every Shabbat, we read 2 Torah portions. We read the whole one of this week, and then in Mincha, we read a little bit of next week. So this is stressing the connection between the Torah portion. It sort of like weaves them all together, that each week contains a little bit of the next week as well. We have to understand this week's Torah portion is Ki Tetzei, when you go out to war. And next week's Torah portion that we read in Mincha is Ki Tavo, when you come back in. These are 2 opposites, one from the other. In the names of the Torah portions, right? This week we read Ki Tetzei, means to go out, and next week we read when you come in, Ki Tavo, when you come in. So going out and coming in are 2 opposites. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's see. Hashem the parshot, in the names of the Torah portion, Hashem moral tochan, that the name indicates on the Torah portion, Tetzei, going out, and Tavo, which is going to be next week, coming in. Shiyatzia v'yibiyah, that the going out and the coming in, these are 2 opposites, one from the other. But tochan, a parshot, what's about the content? That's the names. The names are opposite. What about the content of the 2 Torah portions? Ki Tetzei l'milchama, when you go out to war on your enemy. That's going out to war. Next week's Torah portion is Ki Tavo el ha'oretz v'yirashta v'yashavtavo. It's talking about coming into the land of Israel, not going out, but going back in and settling the land. Shiyatzia l'milchama v'yashav ha'oretz, going out to war and settling in the land. These are 2 opposite situations, one from the other. Shekain, and so it is off the milchama, also in a war. The war, one second. So we can say, okay, so they're 2 opposites. So, this is if they're 2 opposites, so we'll see. Why not leave them separate? Says no. Here we go. Shechein av shebemilchama, because also in a war, hu bofen v'nasan Hashem elokecha b'yadecha v'shavisa shivya. It says even in the war, when you do succeed in the war, and God gives your enemy in your hand. Oh, so that's sort of like peace already, huh? That's a little bit, and even more, you take prisoners. But still, the fact of the matter is that's this week's Torah portion. It still is attached somehow or other with a state of uncertainty. It's a lack of rest and being settled. So this week's Torah portion, Ki Teitze, is talking about unrest, war, conquering, defeating, but it's not a state of peace and productivity. Kamudgash, like it says like the Rambam says, after a Jewish soldier gets involved in the war, in battle, then he has to forget about everything else. Yishan al mikveh Yisrael. He has to totally rely on God. V'yasim nafsho b'kapo, and he has to put his soul into his own hands. In other words, take risks. Don't think about yourself at all. Think only about defeating the enemy, not about. I mean, the reason that you'll protect yourself is because if you get hurt, then that lessens your chances of winning of the army. But the main thing is, lo yachshav lo beishto, a person should not think about not his wife and not his children, not his family. V'yifne mikol davar the milchama, and all of his attention should just be on one thing, not coming back from the war, not that we're going to finish this war, we're going to be victorious. He's thinking one thing at all. The person who is in front of me, I am going to defeat. That's the only thinking about in war. B'kol libo, b'kol nafsho. He's not thinking about when the war is going to be over, when the war is this. He has to put his whole soul into war. Hepech v'tachlis. This is totally the opposite of what it says, conquering the land of Israel, of settling in the land of Israel, and how do you say settling in the land of Israel and living in it? Ish tachat gafno v'ish tachat teino. So like it says, each person is under his vineyard and under his fig tree. Lahavas bikurim. And afterwards it says, this is going to be next week's Torah portion. It says that you bring first fruits after you've already settled in the land. So if so, this week's Torah portion talks about a volatile situation where you're in war. And you have to go out into war and not think about yourself and not think about your family, not think about building. You're thinking about only one thing, and that is war. Not thinking about victory or your own personal welfare. One thing, thinking about war. Right? I mean, maybe victory in this particular situation, but you're not thinking about the war is going to end, which is not the case next week's Torah portion. Next week's Torah portion is talking about the exact opposite. It's talking about a state of settling the land and even bringing the first fruits to the holy temple. Everything is very calm, very settled, the way things are supposed to be. You bring to the holy temple, this is in such a way that you were rejoicing with all the good, and that you are in comfort, etc. Okay, so what in a way, what is the ideal situation? The ideal situation is one of war. That seems to be over here. We're in the world in order to conquer, in order to this, or maybe the ideal situation is to be settled. Okay, obviously these are two diametric opposites, because when you're in war, you're not supposed to think at all about a situation of calmness and being at home with your family and your wife and your job and doing positive things. You're thinking only one thing, destroying the enemy. On the other hand, when you're at home, so you're calm, you're not going to think, what if there's going to be a war? Maybe I should prepare. Alder says similarly, regarding to the Torah portion, on our service of God. And we're talking about a regular, normal, how do you say, political situation. One is war and the other one is peace. What about right now? How we serve God? That's the whole purpose of the Torah. That these are sentences from the Torah, right? The Torah is talking about our connection to God. This week's Torah portion is talking about going out to war on your enemy. What does that mean spiritually? Morally, Yetzias the Nefesh Elokis, and how the godly soul comes from its source, from above. That's what we read in the preface. In the world of Atzilus, like it says, the soul that you gave me is pure, and it comes down below into this physical world. And sin, on this it says, we say in the morning that God, you sent my soul down into this world from different levels, and it says what the levels are. Tahora, barata, yatzarta, nafachta. Bitlabesh, to be clothed in a body and an animal soul in order to refine them, and to purify them, the world and the body. Until you refine the world around you. And this is the idea of a war. And especially in the time of exile, like now. Just one moment. Resume. Alder says similarly, war and peace in the soul. War is the soul coming from the upper worlds before it was born, coming through all these spiritual, wonderful, holy levels, each one a little bit less than the other one, until it comes down into this world where the world is not holy at all. And especially the body, everything is concealed. We don't see any good at all. And what's our job in the world? Why did God do such a seemingly cruel thing? Because he's putting us into war. And we, especially now in the time of exile, we're in war. That shows that the assertiveness and the defiance and the positiveness and the joy that we have to have in this war in order to win. But that's what we should be concerned with. On the other hand, Kitavol, or it's the second Torah portion that we read, when you come to the land of Israel, God will give you the portion. This shows on a service in a way of menucha, v'shalom, serving God, but not in a way of defiance and overcoming the enemy and assertiveness and everything. This is showing how you serve God in the time when the Jewish people are in the land and they have the holy temple. And then the whole service is not so much to go against bad, but to do more good. This is the opposite of what it is to be a war, in the time of exile. And the main thing, od v'ikar, the tochen ki tavo oras, the main content of coming to the land of Israel and inheriting it, taking it over, right, and settling in it. When we read the Torah, and the Torah is eternal, that's relevant now. How? I mean, we're in exile, aren't we? In exile. Say that the first Torah portion we read, Ki Teitzei, that's this week, that's talking about now. And Tavo, which when we're talking about settling in the land, that's relevant to days of Moshiach, everything will be calm, but not now. So there will be no. Also to be calm and to serve God from this total, loving, easy way, not to fight against the bad, that's now also. Shayach Gam, mainly Lahavia Ela Oretz Yerusha, that's mainly to going into the land of Israel and settling in it. Settling in it. V'yashavta Ba, this will mainly be in the future. B'gu'ula mitit v'shlema, in the future redemption by means of Mashiach. How is that going to be now? How is that going to be now? We'll see. Al Pizeh, according to this, is stressed even more the difference and the distance between Haparsha Kitetse, when you go out to war, which that's talking about the time of exile, and Kitavo, which is talking about the time when Mashiach brings the future redemption. Lorak Beisofani, this is not just two types of service of God. One is war, and the other one is peace and calmness. That the difference. But this is a general, and this is also in connection to serving God and receiving a reward for the service. Shaparashat Kitetse, that which we're talking about in Kitetse, going out to war. This is talking about our service of God now. Ma'asenu v'avasenu, this is especially the time of exile. Now we have to work. But Parshas Kitavo that we're going to read next week, this is mainly the reward that we're going to receive in the Inyan Zeh. This is especially stressed when we say the two in the two chapters of Pirkei Avot that they read. By us, we're still reading them separately because we have an additional week. But there they read Parashat Rishon and Sheni. They read the first chapter of Pirkei Avot and the second chapter of Pirkei Avot. To explain what is Pirkei Avot is a tractate of Mishnah, but it doesn't have any laws. It just has sayings and advice on how to serve God, how your attitude should be, how you should deal with people, how you should deal with with the world, how to love God, how to fear God, to deal with the Torah, how you should treat the Torah. It was advice. That's advice. That's called Pirkei Avot. Pirkei means chapters, and Avot of our fathers, because the rabbis of the Talmud, etc., they are really our fathers, the fathers of Judaism, and not just in the laws that they bring, but also the attitudes that they bring to us. And that's in Pirkei Avot. So there's 6 chapters altogether. And the first 2 chapters, that's what we read on. I'm sorry, let me just continue. There's a custom to read these 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot, 1 chapter a week, in the weeks between Rosh Hashanah and I'm sorry, the weeks between Passover and Shavuot, the 7 weeks. So every week we read another chapter, Pirkei Avot. Pirkei Avot. But the first week we don't read, we read 6 chapters. But there's others, and Chabad are among them, there's a lot of others, that they read Pirkei Avot, the 6 chapters, 1 a week, and sometimes 2 a week. It depends on, like in last week's, to catch up so that we finish. Until Rosh Hashanah. That's what we're doing. So now we're reading the first and second chapter of the chapters of the fathers. Anyone who doesn't know what this is, I advise you to read it in English. Very interesting. Last year I gave a whole series of classes on that. You can look it up last year, but you can read it in English also. It's very interesting, the sayings that they have. It's called sometimes it's called the ethics of the fathers. Sometimes it's called the chapters of the fathers. Here's the first and the second chapters. This week we read this. In the beginning of the first chapter, it says Moses received the Torah from Sinai, and he gave it to Joshua and etc. to every single Jew until all the generations. And it says V'hamidu Talmidim Harba, make a lot of pupils. This is stressing, the first is stressing, like we said in Parshas Kitetse, war, work, the work of the Jewish people in doing the Torah and the commandments. In the end of the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, it says, you should know that the reward for the tzaddikim in the future, right? What is the reward? That's what it's talking about, the reward. That stresses the idea of next week's Torah portion, the reward. Being settled, being peaceful. Even though that this reward and work are 2 different things, and there are 2 different chapters, and there are 2 different times, working for the reward and reward, like you have a job, so you work, and then afterwards you get paid, right? It's the same thing. We're working in the exile, and the reward is the Moshiach. Same thing as the 2 Torah portions. They fight the battles, and then they can be settled in the land of Israel. These are different movements of the soul, different situations, different times. And so it is with the soul. The soul comes into the world, you have to work, but then there's going to be the big reward is Moshiach. Like it says, today you do them, and tomorrow you receive the reward. Or after a person dies, he goes to heaven.
Moshiach is the reward, or Olam Haba is the reward?
The Mashiach is going to bring, it's called Yemot HaMashiach. It's called the days of the Mashiach. So Mikol Makom, nevertheless, we read both of them on one Shabbat, in one continuation. In the morning, we read Kitetse, which is talking about war. And in the afternoon, we read Kitavo, which is talking about peace. On the same Shabbat, it's one continuation. Okay, what's the point the Rebbe wants to make? The point the Rebbe is trying to make is there's a way to unite these two so that each one enhances the other simultaneously at the same time. Let's see. The Kudat Biyahu, what's the main explanation? The beginning of the reading of Kitavo, next week's Torah portion, after Kitetze, with this week's Torah portion talks about war, it's sort of like an explanation and a clarification of Kitetze. You're going out to war, but Parshas Kitavo is explaining what type of a war is this supposed to be. That even when you're fighting your battles and you're in this world and there's all these disappointments and there's all these frustrations and there's all sorts of bad things that happen in the world, right? Nevertheless, it has to be in a way of menucha. Even the battles that you fight have to be that they don't shake you up, that you are at rest. You're just doing what you have to do. It's like you're settled already in the land. In other words, you're an emissary of the creator of the universe, no matter where you are, and no matter what your job is. I had a good friend that was sick. So I said, I'm sorry you're sick. He said, yeah, I'm also sorry, but I'm on shlichus. He said, I'm just an emissary. In Chabad, there's this thing of doing what the Rebbe wants, right? The Rebbe is the Moses of our generation. So doing what he wants is like doing what God wants. There has to be in every generation a person that knows what God wants. I said, it's terrible. You can't go and put the filling on people. He says, I'm in shlichus. No matter where I am, I'm just an emissary. God put me here, but I have to act accordingly because I can't regret what I'm doing. There's no benefit in me regretting and feeling bad. That's not what I'm supposed to do. Whatever situation that a person is in, even the worst situations, he has to try to make the most of it, to see the good and to increase good. And even more, that's what it means, that no matter where a person is, no matter what battles you're fighting, there still has to be this point of calmness that you're coming from, this island of certainty. They already has a little bit of the reward. It's already there, even though now he's just involved in the work, as we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. And now let's do